Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this Civ overview, we're going to be taking a look at the Portuguese. Now, Portuguese are officially a gunpowder and naval civilization, but actually strike a nice balance of being a jack-of-all-trades civ without giving up access to at least a few late-game power units. While they're associated most with islands and arena, the online rank stats place them fairly middle of the road these days across the most popular maps, and ever since they received a decent early game bonus to their Foragers, they've been pretty respectable on Arabia, making them feel very different than the last time we looked at them. Let's check them out. To start with their team bonus, Portuguese and their allies research all texts 25% faster, with the exception of aging up at the usual speed. If you were to research every tech available, which would admittedly be a bit unusual, Portuguese alone would save over 14 minutes, so it does add up pretty substantially, especially in Imperial Age. Some techs for which this is particularly notable include Wheelbarrow and Loom, where those alone put you almost a villager ahead. The timing of military upgrades can also be impactful, with fully upgraded crossbows in Castle Age saving nearly a minute, fully upgrading Castle Age Knights saving 39 seconds, chemistry alone coming in 20 seconds earlier, and of course on water, things like War Galley finish just ahead of their usual timing. And remember, this is for everyone on your team. That research boost then combines nicely with their first Civ bonus, which is that all units cost 20% less gold, sometimes giving you a slight tech and now a numbers advantage. Off the bat, this gives Portuguese a solid militia opening, as they're able to create 3 militia and pick up Loom without mining any extra gold, and 3 militia into man-at-arms always feels very smooth with Portuguese. That said, whether it's archers, knights, cavalry archers, siege, or monks, a lot of units benefit from a decreased gold cost. And while gold in Castle Age isn't too hard to get, pretty much any strategy is directly helped, and it even applies to ships, giving a passive boost to pretty much everything you do on any map. Speaking of ships though, their next bonus is that those have an extra 10% HP. Admittedly, 10% isn't huge, but is enough to function like a tiebreaker against generic civs, and also puts them in line with other passive naval bonuses like for Romans and Armenians. Combined with their gold discount, a naval unique unit, and a unique tech we'll get to a bit later, it's no surprise that Portuguese are consistently a top 5 pick on water maps. Their next bonus is what recently revitalized the Civ though, and is their early eco bonus, in which foragers generate 1 wood for every 3 food collected, presumably gathering some twigs while foraging, which makes a lot of sense. This bonus makes Portuguese one of the AI's favorite civilizations without a doubt, if you've ever watched the AI's early builds and its strange berry fixation. Now, given foragers gather around 18 food per minute, that's 6 wood per forager, and with 4 on berries, works out to roughly the same as having 1 extra lumberjack. The idea is this gives you a bit of a boost before your gold bonus has time to kick in. And while you can just play like usual as a passive bonus, you also have the option to get creative and skip an early lumber camp in order to mill your berries almost right away. You'll need to briefly go on straggler trees to pull this off, but it can lead to a decently fast timing for scouts at a tight 18 or a very easy 19 pop feudal advance, even without deer, making it a relatively popular and easy to execute opening for mid-elo players. Like I said though, you can also just play like normal, and end up with roughly an extra 250 wood from berries with no extra work or planning needed on your end. And finally, their last bonus is access to the unique Feitoria building, with Feitoria being Portuguese for a factory. These cost 350 gold and 300 stone, and take up 20 population space, with an implied 100 wood cost in houses being part of that, while then generating an oddly specific 96 food, 42 wood, 60 gold, and 18 stone per minute forever as a continuous trickle. That ends up being roughly 8 or 9 villagers worth of gathering, and considering the 20 pop space requirement, villagers are unquestionably more pop efficient, but Feitorias give several notable advantages. A few of these include that they're much more difficult to raid than the usual miners, lumberjacks, and farmers, then taking up less space as well, certainly much less than farms. And of course, the production is infinite, working far beyond when natural sources of gold, stone, and even wood are used up, making it understandably characterized as a super late game boost. That said, there is another side to it though, which is that it can be used early when paired with a fast Imperial to speed up your initial boom. While it may only contribute as much work as 8 or 9 villagers, it's much faster to build than training those, and doesn't require eco upgrades or town centers, so it's sometimes used to shortcut your economy on safe maps with barely any farms needed. The building does come with some downsides though, namely 20 villagers end up collecting much more in total resources for the same pop cap usage, and even selling wood with that same population of villagers can generate similar amounts of gold at the market anyway. The stone cost is also quite large for a small trickle, taking 14 minutes to recoup just the building's initial stone cost. Looking at the stats, it also doesn't seem to give Portuguese a leg up in long games on Arabia or across all 1v1 maps. It has some obvious advantages for gold generation in very long 1v1 games, accelerating a fast imperial boom, long-term stone generation for mass bombard towers, or on water maps where wood can eventually run out, but with downsides around its initial cost and pop inefficiency to balance. So that's the Portuguese bonuses, giving you an economic leg up in the early, mid, and potentially late game, with a bit of extra emphasis on water. Next, let's take a look at their two unique units, starting with the organ gun. As always, I've recently covered this unit in a lot of depth as its own standalone video, but to summarize for overview purposes, it has a fairly hefty 80 wood and 56 gold cost, but is a great answer to opponents using cheap, low armor units. All of its projectiles deal its advertised attack, which can really add up against low armor, though on the flip side also means every 1 pierce armor your opponent adds reduces your potential damage output by 5, or even 6 for the elite version. The unit counts as siege and gunpowder, meaning it's upgraded by siege engineers, repaired by villagers, and enemies require redemption to convert it, like any siege, and it also can't be garrisoned in castles. It then has a fairly important elite upgrade, giving it more attack in particular to keep up with Imperial Age upgrades, and has a hidden bonus against infantry and skirmishers. Altogether, that makes them very effective against infantry, to the point they can give similar value to hand cannoneers against mass infantry. They're also great against skirmishers thanks to bonus damage, while their high pierce armor makes them a solid damage tank against many ranged units, including skirmishers and nearly all archer and cavalry archer variants. Overall, they're quite versatile, requiring almost no upgrades, and even deal respectable damage to buildings. On the flip side, they can struggle against a decent mass of heavy cavalry, given those units' high pierce armor plus the organ gun's minimum range. Even more scary is the mangonel line, which deals a fair amount of bonus damage to organ guns, while also having similar range. For those reasons, it's common to pair organ guns with either cavalry to handle enemy siege or spear units to handle enemy cavalry. Bombard cannons are also a common pairing to snipe onagers in the late game, and remember how their gold cost discounted and chemistry coming in a little faster. The organ gun is just a solid unique unit that even in small numbers can give some serious punch to whatever existing army composition you have as Portuguese. Their other unique unit is the Caravel, which is a bit more situational, but again nudges you in the naval direction. At first glance, its stats are not super impressive next to the galley line, which is not just more well-rounded, but also cheaper in terms of gold. The Caravel does have a few secret advantages though. First, it's created much faster, and also has no Castle Age upgrade unlike War Galley, so it's just a faster unit to switch into. It also has a special pass-through attack like a Scorpion, making it particularly strong in choke points, or against bunched up ships, where it can more than compensate for their lower base damage and slightly higher cost. The drawbacks are first that they're pretty inept against fire ships, dealing just 1 damage per shot in Castle Age, and also lagging the Galleon's damage against those in Imperial. If your opponent is leaning into fire ships, you're probably safer just not using Caravels. The other issue is the Portuguese galley line is already discounted, has more HP, and with a unique tech has more armor than usual as well. So rather than play with a new unit you're less familiar with, it's pretty tempting sometimes to just keep things simple and go with the galley line, though both units do have situational strengths. Next up, staying on water, but moving on to their unique techs at the castle, the first one, Carrick, gives all of your ships +1/+1 armor. This is basically just a slightly better version of careening, with a higher but still very reasonable cost. Now, 1 extra armor might not sound that important in ship battles, as for example the War Galley has +9 bonus damage versus ships to begin with, but it helps a fair bit against the fire ship line, taking a quarter less damage, and both Careening and Carrick each let your galley line survive an extra attack in head-to-head fights, so it is worth picking up. Their other unique tech goes back to their gunpowder focus, with arquebus letting your gunpowder units track moving targets. That includes your organ gun, hand cannons, bombard cannon, and cannon galleon, which otherwise tend to miss moving targets more often than not. You're basically giving them all ballistics, which they're usually not affected by, and is particularly helpful I find for bombard cannons, given their long range. While bombard towers do already benefit from ballistics, technically arquebus even still helps them a tiny bit by speeding up gunpowder projectiles marginally, but the smart tracking behavior for gunpowder units would be the main reason to get this. It's a little expensive at 700 food and 400 gold, but for bombard cannons especially is pretty nice to have. So that's the unique units and techs, which on top of their unique building gives you lots to play around with, as well as some powerful gunpowder options late. Next, let's take a look at their surprisingly versatile tech tree, starting with the archers. Underpinning this, and every building for that matter, is their 20% gold discount, which isn't just great for the crossbow line and hand cannoneers, but even the cavalry archer technically costs fewer resources than Hun cavalry archers in Castle Age, and can be a solid mid-game play. You then have arquebus on the hand cannon, and a decent early eco bonus with your foragers helping early archers. There's something solid at every stage, and I give the archers an A-. Next up, for infantry, you are missing squires, but again have a slight discount on your champion line's gold cost, making them a natural opening in the early game, and the tech tree overall is solid. They're not top tier as they lack a direct stat bonus, but earn themselves a B+. Moving on to cavalry, things start out pretty well, with a very nice scout rush opening helped by the berry bonus, which then eventually leads all the way up to fully upgraded light cavalry and cavaliers. Their knights are a popular choice, and Portuguese are then one of the civs in the best position to handle the goal demand of combining knights and crossbows together. The late game stable does lack some variety and top tier units, but is respectable enough for a B overall. Next up, for siege, you have a bit of variety, but are again missing the final upgrades to all 3 of the basic siege lines. You do have siege engineers though, and some pretty high ceiling discounted bombard cannons. With the discount in there, I like it enough for a B+, even with a handful of final upgrades missing. Moving on to the Navy, yet again the gold discount is great, and you then have more HP as well. The Forager bonus might seem like it helps here, as it focuses on wood, but it's very common for players to skip a mill to invest in fishing ships instead, and those do technically collect faster than even Portuguese Foragers, plus help you build up your population quickly. I'd say it's an A- early, as they're good even without the berry bonus factoring in, though eventually Foragers will give you enough extra wood for 3 additional early game ships. Late game, you have extra armor, cannon galleons better track targets, and still the 10% HP and gold discount, plus the Caravel to help with especially choke pointy maps. You are missing fast fire ship, but it's still enough for an A- in the late game, and they're in that top 5 discussion on water for sure. Taking a quick look at the monks, they're just missing illumination, which lets monks recharge faster between conversions. Again, the discount applies here, making them a pretty solid monk civ, and more than enough for an A-. As for defenses, it's a pretty open university tech tree, remember all of which is researched a bit faster, and I'd even lump the Feitoria in as a defensive help given how much harder they are to raid. Combining potentially infinite stone and good bombard towers makes them among the most annoying bombard tower civ in either 1v1 or team games, and altogether Portuguese are just a pretty good turtle and boom civ, so I'll give them an A. Finishing up then with their trash units, that is, units that don't cost gold, here they're only missing the Hussar. The gold discount doesn't directly help here, basically by definition, but I'd again argue the option of the Feitoria could be considered an edge in Trash Wars to stall out enemy raiding and give a trickle of gold plus stone to potentially sell. Despite missing Hussar, I'd say it's at least A- potential in Trash Wars, despite the stats not appearing to show a particular strength in longer games. So to close with some final thoughts, maybe the biggest takeaway is Portuguese aren't just a gunpowder and naval civ, despite the unique units and techs pushing you in that direction. They're really a bit of an everything civ, thanks to a solid early eco and just the raw number of units impacted by the gold discount and faster tech switches. From the start of the game, your bonuses line up to support just about anything, from men-at-arms, archers, or early scouts, depending on the matchup and your comfort with those strategies. Transitioning into the mid-game, things open up even more if anything, and you're set up for fully upgraded knights, crossbows, cavalry archers, an organ gun push, or even monks in siege. It's a civ you can play multiple games and have wildly different directions and armies each time, being equally adept at 1TC all in or with a focus on booming. Anytime water is a factor or you're given a chance to fully boom, Portuguese are in a great position and have one of the more dangerous Imperial Age slow pushes with organ guns, bombard cannons, and towers, while saving a lot of gold for their late game armies. But speaking of saving and doing things late, have you finished your Christmas shopping yet? If not, I have just the thing to bail you out, with a new boutique I opened up for discounted high-end products called Spirit of the La-Di-Da. My store even has a great website thanks to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a great-looking website, engage with your audience, and then sell anything from products to content to time all in one place. Using their built-in templates, you can easily customize a website to your preferred aesthetic and what you're looking to do with it. That could include selling physical goods or digital content, including access to your own video library, with Squarespace handling the payment side of things so you can focus on the bigger picture. The search engine optimization tools then help your website show up in searches more often, so you can continue to grow and scale your business more effectively. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/spiritofthelaw to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So that was an updated look at the Portuguese. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.